Hi everyone, welcome back. It's been a while since I posted, but trust me, it's been for very good reason. I've been working so hard on Liberation, my new laser show software, and I've got so many updates for you today. First of all, Early Access program is now available again, and second of all, it's now on Windows. That and so much more is coming right up, so buckle up if you want to hear more. Okay, well, where to start? It's been quite the year. Can you believe it that I first opened the beta test program up around a year ago? It's just flown by, but I'm extremely heartened to see the interest that has been bubbling away about Liberation. People that I don't have direct contact with asking me about it. I've met basically all the top special effects companies in the UK and even abroad who have all heard about the software and are all excited to learn more. I've got so much to catch you up on. Before we get there, I wanted to thank xLaser who have been supporting the project ever since I first announced it a year ago. They've been the main platinum sponsor all of this time. I really couldn't have done it without them. So what's been happening for that whole year? Well, there were lots of big shows using Liberation. Glastonbury's Arcadia stage run by Danny at Reach Lasers using 90 lasers. I made a video about the pre-production, so check that out if you're interested, but it went really well. Liberation was solid for the full run, hours every night. Danny still uses it on all of his festival shows. There was another outing for the synthwave spectacular Polaris, this time at the gorgeous Chapter House in Lincoln Cathedral as part of the Frequency Festival. Then a huge projection-mapped New Year's show, our third time in Newcastle, featuring over 100 lasers and lighting fixtures. And Flora Litchfield ran her mesmerising light stream at the Spectra Festival in Aberdeen. There were many other shows all around the world, and there's a lot of extra footage of these at the end of this video. Anyway, yes, let's recap the two main important bits of news. First piece of news, the Windows version. You asked for it, you wanted it, I listened to you, there's a Windows version now. So everyone who's on the Early Access program can get either the Mac or the Windows version. And now that Early Access Patreon program is live again. About a year ago, I set up Patreon for a limited number of supporters, and that's been full for a while now. But in the last few months, I've been working on my own payment system, and finally it's ready for new patrons. So if you want to get the latest stable version of Liberation, then you can now join us. More information about that at the website liberationlaser.com. But we've got a small community of supporters that are all running shows all across the world. I can't thank those patrons enough because they are supporting the development of this project, this very complex project. It's taken literal years of my life. So I'm so pleased that people are contributing not just financially, but also creatively. I often ask what features are important to my supporters, and we have frequent votes, we have regular Zoom calls, and some of the features that are in Liberation right now are a direct result of things that this community has asked for. But it's not just that, you get other benefits like discounts on hardware. So there's 15% off most of the stuff at xLaser, including Ether Dreams, and also 10% off Helios DACs, which is the USB DAC. I did actually do a video about controllers a while back, so I'll link to that in the description if you want to know more about how to connect your laser into Liberation. Talking about DACs, the Ether Dream is now not just available from xLaser in the US, because Rob Stanley at Stanwax Laser here in the UK now supplies them as well. So anyone in the UK or the EU who doesn't want to ship from America can get it directly from Rob. And again, I'll put a link in the description. So in the last year, I've added countless new features to Liberation. It has been a period of extreme hard work and development. And before I go into all of those new things that I've added, let's just do a quick recap on some of the reasons why people love Liberation at the moment. I've got a list. Let's check my list. First of all, there's a live 3D visualizer. It's on screen all the time. You can run lasers without actually connecting to lasers, so you can practice what it's like, or you can design shows without actually having to have any external hardware at all. But it's not just the visuals, it's the zone editing as well, one of the most important parts of running lasers. So the Liberation zone editor is easy to use. You can see the full output of any laser and all the zones within it. You can zoom in for extreme fine control. And there are even new types of zones, but I'll get to that in a bit. So next up, one of the things that most people comment on is how easy and quick it is to get started with Liberation. And that is because I've designed the interface to be intuitive and, kind of attractive as well. It's very clearly laid out. It's just a creative piece of software, so it's designed to look good. But it's not just about looking good, it's about feeling good as well. So I've implemented the APC40. I've designed it to be as expressive and naturalistic as possible. I like to think of it as like a musical instrument where you can just express yourself. You can get into the zone. You don't have to always consciously think about what you're doing. And there'll be more MIDI controllers supported in the coming months. So here's a really geeky one, so strap in for this one. Liberation has infinite temporal resolution. Now, what the hell does that mean? Probably just sounds like some stupid buzzword that I've made up, but no, it's for real. So where do we start? Most laser software is frame-based, which means that you'll create a series of frames for your animation. And then when you're playing that animation, it will just go from frame 1 to frame 2 to frame 3 to frame 4, and so on. So what happens if you slow down that effect? Well, you'll start to see those frames jerk from one to the next. It will no longer be smooth animation. Now that doesn't happen in Liberation. You can slow down your clips as slow as you like, and you will always get silky smooth animation. And that's why I say it's got infinite temporal resolution, and you'll notice no matter how fast or slow you run them. Now, of course, if you do want that jerky frame stepping effect, there are ways to do that as well, but at least you have the choice this way, and by default, everything will look smooth. There are other benefits to that system apart from just smooth animation. Because everything is stored in kind of a mathematical way, it means that the data for all of that content is tiny. In fact, the entire download for Liberation is less than 50 megabytes, including all of the content. It's just a really smart, efficient way to store and playback content for lasers. And in fact, the entire point stream is calculated on the fly. So whereas most laser software will generate and store not only thousands of frames of animation, but each frame has thousands of points of data, you're essentially storing an uncompressed audio file with 5 channels. That's the equivalent. And Liberation just doesn't need to store any of that bulk of data because it generates it all on the fly. And that's one of the reasons why I call it next generation laser software. Some of the laser driver code is part of my OFX laser open source library that has been in development for 10 years. And actually Liberation itself has been in development now for 5 years. So this is getting to a stage where it's very mature, reliable, solid, efficient, lots of other good adjectives. So let's talk a little bit about that node-based editor. Like I said, it's an extremely efficient and smart way to generate content, and it generates everything on the fly. It is essentially like a synthesizer, right? But it's very easy to do simple things, and yet it's powerful enough to do really complex things as well. I was producing quite a lot of content for my recent shows that you would never imagine just come out of a few nodes. It's really easy to get started with, so I encourage you to learn it and get used to it because honestly, the possibilities are endless. It's such a flexible and powerful system. So you might think that because Liberation is generating all of that content on the fly that it maybe doesn't perform very well. The truth is, it's been tried and tested on many projects with many lasers. My shows frequently have like at least 50 lasers, all running off a single MacBook. It can handle as many lasers as you throw at it. I've even run simulations where I've tested it with over 100 lasers, and it's rock solid. It will run all night. This is software you can depend on, even in its early access state. So that's where Liberation has been, but in the last release, there are even more features to share with you. The first one I want to talk about is the DMX Artnet system, and the first time that I got a real thorough testing in the wild was at Danny's Glastonbury gig last year at Arcadia, because he was running multiple laser bars with 6 laser fixtures in each one that ran from Artnet and DMX. So I needed a way to quickly be able to send data to DMX devices, but without having a whole new system of lighting desk. So I created a way to translate the content in clips and convert those to DMX parameters. So you can convert the color position into various DMX addresses depending on the fixture, and that way you can control many DMX sources, whether they're lasers or even lights or sparkulars. You know, we ran a load of cold spark machines on our recent New Year's Eve show. So it's an incredibly flexible system and can sometimes save you from having to bring a whole separate lighting desk. In the newest release, there is a ton of new graphics capabilities. So I've introduced a new system called the Canvas system, which will let you do complete architectural mapping and splitting up of content over multiple lasers. So we mapped the Baltic building in Newcastle using 10 lasers, and each laser drew a different section of the graphical output. Because I knew I was doing a lot of graphics, I added a load more graphics capabilities. The first one is 3D, so now you can move your shapes around and rotate them in 3D. You can also put things in front of each other using occlusion. Some of the simple shapes now have filled sections which cover up content behind. And that's good not just because it looks cool, but also because it saves the amount of scanning that your lasers has to do. There are also some nodes that lend themselves particularly well to graphics, including the dotter, which takes a line and converts it into spaced out dots. There's even a button you can push that leaves the original line in, so that's a real quick way to create fans with a different color in between. But it's also just a really beautiful effect for certain graphics. There's also the trimmer that can trim the beginning or the end of all of the shapes that you pass into it, and you can transition from one end to the other. It's a really beautiful effect. I've used it all the time. And then if you want to do sort of pre-programmed animations, up until now, the oscillators have only really let you go backwards and forwards or in one direction, sawtooth, square waves, etc. But now there is a custom oscillator, so you can design completely unique animations. And actually for a lot of the preset animations in Newcastle, I made enormous use of this custom oscillator. It's very powerful. So one of the main things I get asked about a lot is, okay, so Liberation is like the best tool for live busking of lasers, but what about timeline? Can you create a show to music? Well, I mean, the answer is yes, and you've got a couple of options. And in fact, you've probably seen my work. They're all set to music, my own music. So I have been creating shows with Liberation myself. The first way to do it is through a system called MIDI playback and record. So while you're running your show and pushing buttons, starting things, adjusting them, you can have all of those converted to MIDI and get recorded into an external audio program. I use Logic Pro, but you can use anything that can record and play back MIDI. So that's been the workaround for getting shows built up until now. However, I do have a new experimental timeline in Liberation that all patrons get access to, and it's fully functional. You know, you can record and play back clips, you can adjust them in the timeline, and in fact, my last show was made with the Liberation timeline, and it's now out there ready for you to test. It needs a bit of refinement in the interface. Timelines are incredibly complex things, but it is fully functional. You can put music in there, you can sync the tempo, you can record and play back, you can adjust it. So test out the timeline, give me feedback. I'm going to be doing lots more development, adding lots more features to it. But for now, you've got two options when it comes to making timeline shows. Which now brings me to synchronization. So Liberation for a long time has been able to sync to an external MIDI clock, but I've also added Ableton Link compatibility. So now you can sync up with anything that can produce Ableton Link. Obviously, Ableton Live can do that. but I believe also show control and lots of other clock synchronization tools can produce Ableton Link. So that's just a second option for you. And obviously those two things go hand in hand particularly well with the timeline system. One of the next things high on my list is to implement timecode, LTC. For the large shows that bands take out on tour, everything has to run to timecode, and that's coming soon. So I mentioned zones before, but we've now got two new types of zones. Now, how often do you set up zones that are so thin because you've just got a tiny little bit of ceiling, and you're fiddling around with 4 corner points that are so close together? It's really, really annoying. So I invented something called a line zone. So now you just have the beginning of the zone, end of the zone. You can move those 2 ends around as much as you want, and you can just decide how wide that zone should be. It's a much, much quicker way to set up very thin zones. You don't need to just use 2 points. You can add more points and you can set up a curve zone. So this is very powerful for if you're mapping onto a balcony that's got a curve to it, or I've even mapped onto bridges, arch-shaped bridges, and it's just nice to have a zone that is exactly that shape. You can just send any content to it, it'll always look good, it'll always be mapped around that. It's another powerful architectural mapping capability. And those curve zones can be automatically smoothed, so you can just add as many points as you want, or you can have full control with the Bezier curves. So if you're used to working with vector graphics, then you can customize those curve zones, those line zones as much as you like. It's been a great system. I love the curve zones and the line zones, really powerful. Now, of course, we've also got the subdivided zones, which is a way to have extremely fine control over sections of building, whether to wrap it around a cylinder or to correct for the warping in your laser. And you can subdivide zones as many times as you like and spend as long as you want, mapping it onto very complex shapes. Now, everything I've mentioned is pretty glamorous and fun and exciting, but actually when you're using an app, it's got to feel right and it's got to look right. So I've spent so much time polishing and refining the interface. So it's things like having high resolution fonts and graphics. So now if you're running on a Retina display, you'll have super crisp previews of the 3D previews, also all the clips, the clip deck, the fonts, everything is now Retina supported. Liberation is modern software, and one of the new things you notice about modern software is that you can quit anytime you like, and when you load up the software again, you're exactly where you left off. It's got its own automatic state saving, and Liberation has had that since the very beginning. So no matter what you're doing, whether you're running a show, whether you're editing zones, you can quit out the app, come back in, and you haven't lost anything. You can never lose anything. State save is one of those things that just makes your life better. So these are some of my favorite features of Liberation, and there's so much more that I haven't even mentioned. But I'd be here all day. I've got to cut this off at some point. If you're interested in checking out Liberation, like I said, the early access program is available, and it is very much to be considered as a Patreon style system. I can't do this without monthly support. This is a community that I'm building, and I want your creative ideas. Join us on the regular Zoom calls, post on the forum, show off the work you've done. It's a collaborative community that I'm extremely proud to be part of. And honestly, I couldn't do it without all my patrons. So if you want Liberation to continue to thrive, then please consider signing up as a subscriber. I'm going to close out this video with a few clips from recent Liberation projects, but I want to thank once again all of my patrons who have been supporting me. I couldn't have done it without you. And also thanks once again to XLaser, who have been my platinum sponsor since the start of this process. I'll be doing a live stream in a couple of weeks to answer your questions, so if there's anything else you want to know, leave a question in the comments and I'll get to all of those next time. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I'm excited about where we're going. If you want to join us on our journey, then please, you'd be very welcome. And until the next time, thanks so much for watching. See ya!
Stop. to live, one heart to give. Live it to the fullest and have no regrets. Let's celebrate all the good times. Wave your hands in the air, it's a good vibe. Tonight I'm gonna dance like nobody's watching. I've turned a whole lot of nothing into something. I've got the crew with me and the beat is bumping. The bassline dumping, the place is jumping. Yeah, for the atmosphere, the future is bright, liberation's here. Yeah, for the atmosphere, the future is bright, liberation's here. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, new beginning. I've got self-belief, so I'm winning. I take action, no point in wishing. I've got vision and I'm never switching. Nobody's bringing me down. I'm a queen on the scene, let me fix my crown. Can't get enough, can't get enough, can't get enough, can't get enough of